Okay, it's 1 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started today. All right, good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing? Hopefully everyone had a good weekend with 1 extra hour of sleep on Sunday. I know there was a Halloween on Saturday, but getting that 1 extra sleep, that was the real treat this weekend, at least for me. But I know probably for you guys, a lot of you guys probably spent the time studying, because there's midterm this week. Yeah, but got 1 extra hour, so that's good. It's getting darker a lot sooner now. Okay, and so today we're embarking on a new chapter for this class. So we're starting our unit on ethics. So it's going to be very different than what we covered, up until this point. But they are connected to each other in a certain way, which is kind of why these two topics are kind of packaged together in the same class. Okay. Besides that, we have our midterm coming up on Thursday. And so the midterm, same as it was last time, is going to be a 24-hour exam. So I'm going to open up the exam at 1 p.m. on Thursday, and then you're going to have until 1 p.m. on Friday to finish the exam. So in terms of the number of questions and the format of the exam, it's going to be exactly the same. So there's going to be 4 short answer questions where you can basically just type in the answers into the browser. I made sure that there's no more vague questions, and there's it's more clear what I want you to answer in the short answer one. So no more fiascos like last time. Hopefully that will occur. And then there's gonna be 3 problem solving questions, and I tested them out myself, and they don't take too long. But then they should test you on your knowledge of everything that we covered up until this point. Okay. And so besides that, there's the review video. So I filmed that on Sunday. So was everyone able to access the review video? So I posted it in the announcement that I sent out, and it's also in the class organizer for this week as well. So you can access the YouTube link on either of those ones. So did everyone who's tried to check it out, has everyone been able to watch it?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, great. Okay. And then the last thing is that we have a homework due today. So the homework, it's covering, the last couple of weeks of the economic stuff. So that's inflation, that's replacement analysis, and that's also a little bit more practice with taxes, because I know tax calculation can be a little bit tricky. And so that's going to be due at midnight tonight, or 11:59. And as soon as the deadline passes for that, I'm going to post the solutions for homework 5 so that you can have that available for you to study as well. So I'm going to stay up until then just to make sure you guys have that available. Okay. Okay, are there any questions on the homework or the exam or anything before we get started today?
Can we go over problem 4 in the homework?
Problem 4, yes. Yeah, I can do it quickly. Let me see. So that's the inflation problem, correct?
Yes.
Okay, let's do that first then. So do you want both parts, or just one part, or which one you're thinking of?
Part B, 4B.
4B, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, this one's tricky, okay? And so 4B basically is saying that, there's kind of a lot going on. So in 4B, what we're saying is that, the college here at Cal State Fullerton, they want to construct some new buildings. So this is actually happening right now. So, it's not talked about a lot because, the buildings aren't going to be finished for another 9-10 years, and actually with the financial situation now, we don't know what's going to happen. But there was some plans to build some new buildings here for our college, and so to kind of help this, the state government has agreed to help fund these new buildings. Okay, right? And so what's going to happen is that the state government has agreed to pay $500,000. Okay. And this is money that's going to be given today. Okay. Okay. Plus an additional $35,000 per year. Okay. To help cover the construction costs, basically. Okay. And this is going to take place over 8 years. Okay. And then the other piece of information that you need to know is that both of these cash flows right here are given in real dollars. Okay. And so real dollars, remember, it represents basically purchasing power. Okay. And remember, whenever you have real dollars, you need to have a time base for this. And so it's not explicitly said in the problem, but the time base for this for these real dollars is today. Okay. Okay. And so you can say it's 2020 if you want. Okay. Okay. And so, you know, the state's not going to give this money to Cal State Fullerton free. And so basically, in order to reimburse the state, okay, what Cal State Fullerton has to do, it has to repay the state $45,000 each year. Okay, plus a large sum at the end. Okay. 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 And then what it also says in the problem is that this $45,000 and this F is given in actual dollars. Okay. And so you have you know, both actual and real dollars here going on at the same time. Okay. And so, you know, in order to solve this problem, you know, we need to properly use our different rates and all the different rules that we have. Okay. Okay. And so the other information that the problem gives you is that it gives you the various rates. Okay. And so what the problem says is that the real rate of return, or the real interest rate, for this is going to be 4%. Okay. And then the other thing that the problem gives us is the inflation rate, which is 5%. Okay. And so with all this information, what the problem asks you to solve for is this value F, such that, you know, everything kind of balances out. Okay. Okay. And so in order to properly, you know, compute all these things, we have to make use of our rules. Okay. And so the first, you know, the first rule that we're going to use is, you know, the fact that, you know, we have real dollars here from a state investment. And so in order to convert that real dollars to different time frames, we need to use the real interest rate. Okay. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to compute the present worth of the state investment. Okay, using the real interest rate. Okay. Okay. So let's see, present worth state is going to be equal to 500,000. Okay. Plus, and so 500,000 is already a present sum. Then we're going to add to that 35,000. Okay. And since this is a uniform series, we need a P over A. Okay. The interest rate that we're going to use for this is the real rate, which is 4%. Okay. And then we're going to do this for 8 years. Okay. Right. And so that's the present worth for the state. Okay. Next, I want to compute the present worth of the amount of money that the college is going to pay. And remember, since the numbers that were given in the problem were actual dollars, right? And so the rate that we need to use for this is the market rate. Okay. Okay. And so the market rate wasn't given to us in the problem, so we have to compute it. Okay. And so the market rate is going to be I, which is equal to I prime, which is our real rate, plus the inflation rate, plus the product of I prime times F. And this is going to be 9.2%. Okay. And so the present worth for the college is going to be 45,000 which is an amount that's paid every year. And so we do P over A, 9.2%, because that's our market rate in 8 years. Okay. And so you notice in this problem, since we have an interest rate that's not a full number, you'll either have to use the formulas, or if you want, you can also interpolate between the tables, or you can, in this case, it's pretty close to 9%, so you can use the table for 9, okay? Plus F, okay? And since this F is a future payment, then this is going to be P over F, 9.2%, and 8, okay? And if you equate these expressions, the fact that we use each rate according to we match the rate with the type of dollars this is. This is, I think, rule number 2, which says that if you use real dollars, you have to use the real interest rate. And this is rule number 1 right here, which says that we have to use the market rate for any actual dollars. Okay. And so we're going to utilize one more rule, which is rule number 3, where, remember, rule number 3 says that if you have a actual dollar amount and a real dollar amount, and it's the same time base and they're evaluated at the same time, which in this case they are, because we're both computing present worths, okay? Then we can set these equal to each other, okay? And so once you set these equal to each other, you can use that to solve for F. And I say that, and I just noticed that there's a typo in my solution. So I do need to fix that. So I'll fix that right after the lecture today. But this is basically the approach that you need to take in order to solve the problem. Okay. So that kind of makes sense, how we use the different rates for the different kinds of dollars, and we use the rules to kind of equate them. That was kind of the exercise with this one. But there is a typo in my solution, so I do need to fix that, and I'll do that right after the lecture. Okay. Right. And so I know there's a problem on 3B, but maybe we'll talk about 3B in the office hours, because I do want to get started with ethics today. Any other quick questions on this problem before we move on? Okay. All right. And so we are embarking onto a new journey. So what we're starting today is engineering ethics. Okay. And so just to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit, just to tell you guys some of the reasons why we're doing ethics, because a class in ethical theory doesn't seem like it fits in with engineering much at all, because all your other classes, and even for a lot of this class, it involves using formulas and using numbers. But the reason ethics is taught is because it's a requirement for any engineering program here in the U.S. Okay? And the reason for that is even though you're going to be spending the majority of your work as a professional engineer doing technical work, at the end of the day, the projects that you work on are still going to be used, and they're going to affect the lives of, other people. Okay? And so we learn ethics just to make sure that, the decisions that we make and the projects that we undertake, and, all the stuff, takes these into account. Okay. Right. And so I'll start, another thing I'll say is that, a lot of engineering programs, basically see the ethics portion of their curriculum as just something that just has to be just gotten out of the way. So there's usually not a lot of passion and not a lot of thought that's given into it. So I'll tell you a little bit about my own experience taking engineering ethics as an undergrad. So first of all, it was an 8:30 class, so 8:30 a.m. It was really early in the morning. And just to make sure that everyone went to class, there was an attendance part of the grade, so people had to come and sign in, for the class in order to get attendance credit. But a lot of people, even with that requirement, a lot of people, I would say, like at least half the students, couldn't be bothered to wake up to come to ethics class in the morning. It got so bad that what I would do for some of my friends, about 4 of them, I would go in to the class and sign in for those 4 friends in addition to myself. You know, which is kind of ironic given that it's a class in ethics. But you know, it was so bad that even like the TAs didn't really care about it. Like I would walk into the classroom and then the TA would be sitting right in front of the sign-in sheet, and like we'd look each other dead in the eye, and I, you know, very clearly sign in for 4 people on the sign-in sheet, and then just go back to my seat, and then you know, no one ever said anything about it. So, you know, and my friends all got credit for it too. So, you know, I don't want this portion of the class to be like that. You know, it's you know, ethics. Yes, it's a requirement that we have to cover, you know, in order for us to be accredited as a you know, as an engineering program in the U.S. But just because it's something that we have to do doesn't mean that it has to suck. So, you know, I really want this part of the class to, you know, to be something that, you know, you'll remember. And you know, I'm gonna try my best, you know, to have some fun with it, which is difficult because, you know, we're gonna be talking a lot about a lot of case studies where, you know, a lot of really terrible things happen. But you know, it's I'm going to try to make this kind of as engaging as it is. So you know, it's not something that you look back on, you say that part of my college experience kind of sucked. Okay. And so up to this point, you know, in this class, we've basically been talking a lot about economics, right? And so, you know, even though, you know, the calculations that we went over, like present worth, all that stuff is important, but kind of the big upshot that I want you guys to get from that is that engineering is a business. Okay? And so like all businesses seek to be profitable. So, you know, when you're making decisions for your engineering projects, you know, you've already seen in order to decide what equipment to buy, how to depreciate, you know, all that stuff, you have to make those decisions with the intent that, you know, my project has to be profitable so that the company can survive. Okay? But, you know, the other side of engineering is that, you know, the projects and the products that engineers work on will be used by people. Okay. And a lot of times, you know, a lot of the work that we do as engineers, you know, we want to do them to make people's lives better, right? But just by the inherent effect, just that, you know, we're making something that's going to affect people's lives. In addition to the business side of it, there's also moral and ethical, you know, ramifications that we need to consider. Okay. Okay. Which, you know, in hindsight, you know, always seems easier than it actually is, right? So, you know, we'll be talking about a lot of case studies in this class, and you know, you guys are going to be studying case studies for your final project as well. And so, you know, I think in retrospect, it's very easy to look at some of these things like, wow, you know, maybe they shouldn't have done that, right? And so, you know, usually when we say, you know, we want to act ethically as an engineer, what we mean is, you know, we don't want to hurt, maim, injure, or kill other people. Okay, and so that sounds easy, right? Because we do that every day, hopefully. But you know, when you're working with like a very large and complex engineering projects, especially when you have the economic side and, you know, a lot of other pressures to account for, it can get really complicated. Okay. And so to kind of illustrate this, I'm going to tell just a quick story. So I'm not going to get into too many of the details because one of the groups is studying this one, but I want to tell you the story about the Ford Pinto. Okay? Right. And so the Ford Pinto is a very classical case study for engineering ethics. And the group that's doing this for their project will go into a lot more of the details, but I do just want to kind of highlight just kind of the main things, just to kind of illustrate kind of the dilemmas and kind of the complexity that goes into these. Okay? And so if you are not familiar with this, the Ford Pinto was a car. Yeah, it's the rear end collision. The Ford Pinto was a car that was put out by Ford in the 1970s. Okay, right. And so the car looks something like this. Okay. I know I'm not an artist, but you get the idea. It's a car. Okay. And so this car has become famous throughout history, or at least since the 1970s, for 50 years now. But it's become famous for all the wrong reasons. Okay? And so what happened to this car was that, or kind of the big event that people refer to, happened on August 10th, 1978. Okay. And so what happened on this day was that a Pinto, a Pinto was driving on a highway, and it was struck from behind. Okay. And so it was just a very routine rear end collision. But what happened with the Pinto was that because of the way that the engineers designed this, the fuel tank was actually located very close to the rear of the car. It had very, very little protection. And so what happened was that the fuel tank ruptured, and then like you see from the chat, it caused an explosion which killed all 3 people inside. And I think they were very young teenage girls too. So it made national news. That's kind of the reason this became a big deal. So this wasn't the first time that a rear end collision on a Pinto caused a fire, but it was one of the ones that was most heavily publicized, because it did result in deaths, and the people that were inside the car were very, very young. Yeah. Okay. And so of course Ford was sued in a criminal lawsuit. Okay. And what they found through the lawsuit was that the Ford engineers that worked on the Pinto were actually fully aware of all the safety risks that were in the gas tank design. But what happened was that Ford actually pushed this design through, knowing that there were flaws, in order just to get the car to market. So basically, I don't want to get into too many details, but basically there were a lot of economic pressures from Ford in order to get that to market, just because they wanted to compete with a lot of the other companies that were out there. Okay? And so because of that rush design, and because of that pressure to have this project be profitable, right? Then it kind of influenced the engineers to kind of do something that was something that they knew was unsafe. Okay. The interesting thing with the Ford Pinto was that it actually met the federal standards for safety at the time. Which is the reason why Ford was basically allowed to sell the car in the first place. Okay? But what the Pinto didn't meet was the engineering standards for safety. Okay? And so there's a few standards of safety that we'll go over this later on too. And they're different. So the federal standards back then were a lot more lax, and so even though the car met those federal standards, it did not meet the engineering standards on which that defines the the safety of the car. Yeah. Okay. And so this is a very classical case, because the engineers involved knew very much of the risks, but management pushed them through to kind of push the design through just to make the car profitable. Okay? As you can imagine, it's in hindsight, like we said, like this is something that's easy to see, where it's like you shouldn't, they obviously shouldn't have done that. But at the same time too, if they did have to redesign the car, and kind of miss their kind of window of opportunity for economic profitability, then that affects other things too. Because, you know, if Ford's not going to be as profitable, then they probably have to lay off some workers, you know, and that affects people's lives as well. So, you know, you know, when something big like this happens, it's very easy to say, you know, yeah, they shouldn't have done that. But at the same time, you know, the alternative also has a lot of consequences too. So, you know, the thing with ethics is that it's not a black and white thing that, you know, like that we can usually say with like economics. You know, we can compute the numbers. There's a lot of gray area with this, and there's kind of a lot of you know, a lot of complexity and nuance that are hard to see. Okay. Okay. And so that's kind of a story just to kind of illustrate, you know, why engineering ethics is important, and, you know, why we're embarking on this journey, you know, for the rest of the class. So let's talk about engineering ethics kind of more in general. I see the video that's in the chat, but I'll check it out after the lecture. Okay. And so, you know, the Ford Pinto, you know, it's a great story, and, you know, the ethical dilemma there had to do with public safety. Okay? And so public safety, you know, that's a really big part of it, because, you know, a lot of engineering products can put people's lives in danger. But there's other aspects of engineering ethics as well, okay, that we're gonna go over. And so some examples of this would be like bribery, fraud, environmental impacts, honesty in research, right? Let's see, computer privacy, and then a big one is also conflicts of interest. Okay, and so there's a lot of ways, you know, there's a lot of aspects to ethics. Okay, and so the definition for ethics, you know, I've been saying it a lot, but I think it's nice to have kind of a formal definition. Okay? And so ethics is the study of the characteristics of morals. Okay. And morals, we can define that further and say that moral choices are ones that are made by individuals, and in this case, engineering teams. Okay. And so a lot of ethics, at least that what we'll see, you know, has to do with decision making. Okay. And so in particular, you know, this is the definition of ethics in general. But engineering ethics, you know, kind of applies this idea to just kind of the rules and standards that govern the conduct of engineers and their roles as professionals. Okay. Okay. And so, you know, just probably as you're probably thinking right now, ethics is not very much a science kind of subject. It's much more of an art, as I like to say. Okay. So there's no formulas, there's no tables, there's no definitive answers. So there's no you know, there's no concrete answers for everything. Okay. And in fact, you know, the reason that there's no formulas and no tables is because I would consider ethics to be even more complex than, you know, even the most complex engineering systems, just because there's so many different angles that you can go with. Okay? And unfortunately, you know, since we don't have that much time left, you know, we're not going to be able to cover all the really complex intricacies and nuance. Okay? And so, you know, with the goal of this section is not to really, you know, make you experts and philosophers, I guess, in terms of moral theory. Okay, but what I want to get at this section of the class, you know, basically up until the end of the semester, is I want to just give you guys an awareness of, you know, all the moral ramifications that an engineering project can have. Okay, and so undoubtedly, you know, as you go about your engineering careers, you're going to come across situations that you know, will likely be really different than the cases that we look at. Okay? And so, you know, you might run into a situation and you might look back on the notes or what we did in this class and say, this doesn't fit together with anything you know, that we covered, and that's okay. Okay. But what I'm hoping for is that through the exposure to all these different scenarios, you know, and all these different ideas and all the different case studies, you know, you'll get a good sense of, you know, the kinds of ethical dilemmas that engineers have faced in the past, and you can use those to inform your decisions on, you know, how you can act in the future. Okay. And so that's why, you know, I'm for the final project, the final presentation is really big for me, because, you know, I not only want you to study your own case study, but I want you to look at, you know, what other people have studied as well, because all of that information will be, you know, valuable to you, you know, as you build your kind of, you know, sense of morals and your sense of engineering ethics. Okay. And I see that there's already some discussion in the chat about this, so that's, you know, that's great, you know. And the thing with this section is that, you know, it's going to be different from, you know, engineering economics, because, you know, a lot of the lectures, not so much today, but, you know, in the coming weeks, you know, a lot of the lectures I'm going to be basically tossing the mic to you guys, and having you guys kind of discuss in kind of smaller groups about certain things, because, you know, I feel like that's kind of the best way to learn about these ethics, is to not only, you know, hear about it from someone that's lecturing, but also kind of engaging with it yourself and talking about, you know, how you would act in certain situations. Okay. Okay. And so one other thing I'll mention is that, you know, when you're looking at these case studies, and you're looking at you know, other people who have done some engineering mishaps, keep in mind that, you know, as engineers, we don't always have all the information available to us. And so, you know, if I think a lot of the probably a lot of the Ford Pinto engineers, maybe not, but if they knew that, you know, that it would, you know, explode and kill people, that might have changed the way that they did, or changed the decisions that they made. Okay? And so as engineers, you're never going to be 100% certain about, you know, about the outcome or the consequence of your actions. Okay. But so there's always going to be a sense of risk, or a sense of, you know, there's a certain probability that this might happen and certain not. Okay. And so a big part of, you know, ethical theory is, you know, managing these risks and minimizing them through where you can, through, you know, adequate testing and good design, and ethical reporting. So all of those are going to be part of your professional responsibilities. Okay. So that was a lot of talking and not that much writing. So are there any questions on this before we move forward?
I have a question.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Are we going to be going over some like engineering regulation and like federal and state law?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of those are pretty field dependent. And so, you know, if you're working on like automotives, then they have their own regulations, and aircrafts have their own regulations. So just because of the short amount of time in the class, and we actually have a very, you know, varied group of students here. So actually, you know, most of you guys are mechanical, but there's also a lot of like computer engineering and other stuff too. And so to go over like a lot of those different ones would, you know, it would kind of take too much time. So we're going to talk about, you know, things in general. And the next subject actually in this lecture is going to be the professional codes of ethics that kind of apply to all of engineering. But the specific standards for, you know, for a certain fields, you know, I'm going to kind of refrain from touching on those too much, mostly just because of the limited time we have left. All right, any other questions? Okay. Okay. And so, you know, even though we talk about ethics as kind of this thing where, you know, we have to, you know, act as good people, as kind of say, there's also, but there are still some rules, or there's still some codes of ethics. Okay? Because, you know, as engineers, you know, we belong to a lot of these kind of professional societies. You can think of ones like IEEE or AIAA or stuff like that, right? And so a lot of these societies have their own codes of ethics. Okay? And so when you're not sure about, you know, how to act ethically in a certain situation, you know, these codes of ethics are usually a good place to start. Okay. And so, you know, situations like the Ford Pinto kind of let you know that, you know, as engineers, you know, we also have a responsibility to kind of develop our own codes of ethics. Because if we just follow, you know, just federal regulations or the law, you know, situations like the Pinto can still happen. And so these codes of ethics can be, thought of as like guidelines or rules on which, engineers themselves have developed, that express the rights, duties, and obligations of engineers. Okay. And so what these codes do is that as you read them, you'll see that, a lot of the statements that they make are very general and very broad. Okay. And so they're not, like we said before, these codes don't provide a recipe. They don't provide a formula. And so it's not something that you can look up and say, I have a situation, let me look up at the code, and this should tell me how to act, right? And so all these codes can do is that they can give you a framework for how to, make ethical judgments. Okay? Okay. And so, because in reality, a lot of the ethical situations that you come across can be really complex. Okay. And so, you can use these codes of ethics to help inform you on the best decisions to make, but it's still going to be up to you to interpret these codes and apply to your situation. Okay. And so codes of ethics, they actually serve another purpose. So it's not just something that you can look up to help guide your decision making. It can also be there to support you. Okay. And so what do I mean by that? And so, a lot of times, what you'll see especially as we read through the case studies, a lot of times, the engineers are often pressured by, a lot of times their management, but, other times it's other stuff. They're often pressured by others to do things that they know are unethical. Okay? And so what you can do to kind of back yourself, or to give you some reassurance of your own ethical decision making, you can bring up these codes of ethics and say, I don't feel comfortable doing this because it goes against these codes of ethics. Okay. And so I think we're going to spend, I think, 2 weeks on risk, on health and safety, but then after that we're going to go over what's called organizational ethics. And so organizational ethics are what that means is how do you act as an employee in your company, and how do you go about say that the company is asking you to do something that you don't feel comfortable with or you don't think is ethical. What are your options in those cases in order to kind of stand up for yourself, and to kind of not put yourself in compromising situations. Right? Because if history's kind of told us anything, what can happen sometimes that the company, they might try to pressure you into doing something that's unethical, but then if something goes wrong, then the company is definitely going to make you the fall guy for it. Okay? And so to help avoid those situations, you want to just not get into those situations to begin with. So if there's something that you don't feel comfortable with, use these codes of ethics to basically support you, in case that happens. Okay. Okay. And so there's lots of codes of ethics out there. So, you know, basically almost every engineering society that exists, at least at the national level, will have them. Okay. But for this class, we're going to look at two of them that are pretty good. And you know, I use both of these because they both kind of represent kind of two ends of the spectrum. Okay? And so one code of ethics is going to be the IEEE Code of Ethics. Okay? And the other one is the NSPE. And so IEEE, as you're probably aware, stands for is the Electrical Engineering Society, okay? And NSPE is the National Society of Professional Engineers, okay? And so I bring up both of these because, you know, the IEEE one, as you'll see, so I've linked both of these onto the Canvas site. And so the IEEE code is relatively short and it's easier to understand. But because of that, it's more general and left up to kind of general and more interpretation. And so the NSPE standard, you know, it's a lot longer, it's a lot more detailed, and so it gives you kind of, you know, more concrete direction on certain issues more than the other one, but it does take a little bit longer to read through. So, you know, if you want to read through these, and definitely I recommend it because I want you to reference these into your final projects. Definitely check out the links that's on the Canvas site. Okay, and so I gave you the web links for them, but you can also download a PDF version. So. Something like the IEEE ones, I think you can even print it out and put it into your, you can put it into your office if you want. Okay, okay. Are there any questions on this? Okay. Okay, so that's codes of ethics. So that's oftentimes that's kind of your first stop. If you want to, if you have any questions about, you know, whether, you know, a certain decision or a certain, you know, situation has some kind of ethical dilemmas. Okay. And so the other thing that we'll go over to help guide your decisions is just kind of more general ethical and moral theories. Okay. And so, you know, ethical and moral theories, these are kind of, you know, ways of ethical thought that have been, you know, developed by, you know, philosophers kind of, you know, way back when. Okay. And so, you know, these theories, obviously they're going to be they're very complex. You know, people study these, you know, for their entire lives. And so we're not going to go over, you know, all the intricacies and all, you know, applications of this, but I just kind of want to introduce some of the more common ones that that are used for engineering ethics. Okay. And, you know, don't, you know, as we're going over these, don't feel like that you have to choose one way of thought or another. Okay. And so there's, you know, as you'll see from all these theories that, you know, and even the codes of ethics that, you know, that they can help, but none of these are absolutely right. And so, you know, the point of all these things and kind of exposing you to all these different, you know, theories and codes of ethics is that all of these can kind of help guide your decisions. Okay.
Professor?
Yep.
I don't mean to be a pest, but like, if we, in the professional field, like, if we think something's going on that's unethical, and our boss or managers says something like, we'll just find someone else who will do the job.
Mm-hmm.
What then?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because I think, you know, when you do, so we'll you know, we'll go over that in a couple of weeks. That if you do kind of, you know, speak out and you say something about it, you do risk, you know, losing your job. And I think that's kind of a big thing, because if it's something that you really, you know, you and your family really rely on, that's a real situation that you know, that can have a big impact on your life. And unfortunately, you know, I don't have kind of the right answer for that, because it's, you know, on the one hand, you can say that, you know, if you do go through with what your boss says and then something happens, you know, you could very much, you know, ruin your whole career from that. And so, you know, you say that you're an engineer that worked on the Ford Pinto, and, you know, and you end up being the fall guy, you know, for it exploding. You know, no other, you know, and of course Ford is going to have to fire you after that. And after that, no other, you know, automobile manufacturer or, you know, engineering firm is going to want to hire you. And so, you know, you're going to have to change careers. But at the same time, you know, if you do stand up and then you don't, you know, and your boss ends up firing you because of that, then then there's a lot of uncertainty with that as well, because then you're gonna have to look for another job, and you don't know how long that's gonna take. And so it's there's I don't have the right answer for that. So I think it's important to be aware of like you said, like everything that could happen in these situations, and I hope and pray that you're never put in that situation. But if you are, then I think it's good to kind of say what are your options, and what's kind of the best way to approach that. So yeah, it's a great it's a great it's great that you guys are thinking about this, and it's tough, and I never would want to wish that on anyone. I throw Ford under the bus, but it's not just Ford. So yeah, go ahead. Oh, did you have another question?
Are there any laws that protect employees if your company is ready to make you a fall guy? Not in the instance of the Ford Pinto, though. Say that they want you to design something that's not ethical, and they're prepared to do it, but you're not, and they're clearly in the wrong. Is there anything that can protect you?
Yeah, so there is some laws for that too. So if there's if it's something that's really bad, you can we'll go over it later. You can become a whistleblower. So you can go to the proper authorities and actually report that, yeah, like whistleblower. And so there's a lot of laws that protect whistleblowers in those cases too. But unfortunately, because a lot of these situations have happened, a lot of companies also force you to sign like NDAs, when you go work for them. So even if you don't feel comfortable, doing something, and they let you go, by just binding contract with those NDAs, you're not going to be allowed to talk about it too. But if there is a situation where you feel like you were let go unfairly because you were trying to do what's right, you can absolutely take it to court, and there will be a lot of lawyers and a lot of law firms that will fight for you. All right. So the question is, so first of all, is it legal to get fired for going against them? I mean, it's because of the way the labor laws work. People, you can be let go for a lot of those situations. And there's a lot of court cases that get out, for unlawful like termination of employment. So actually, my dad actually, he actually took a company that he worked for to court for something that he felt like he was unfairly let go for, and he's still kind of fighting that to this day too. So it's tough, and sometimes if you do want to go that route, you kind of have to face the possibilities of a really long legal battle. Yeah. All right, so the question is, how would you answer these types of ethical scenarios in an interview? Yeah, that's a good question. So it's going to depend on what the situation is, and ultimately what the culture in that company is too. So we'll talk about that later on too. That the culture for the company is extremely important. And when you go out there and work in the professional world, you want to find a culture that's right for you. Yeah. All right, so the next question is this a situation of seeking out workers' unions or being a part of one? Yeah, a workers' union will definitely help you because that's the reason the unions exist, is so you have a group of people that will fight for you, in case your employer tries to force you to do something that you feel like is unethical. So it's hard just because unions are kind of a really touchy subject for a lot of people, but when there is one that's available, then that's a big reason what they're there for, is to kind of fight these battles for you. Yeah, great questions, guys. It's I have the notes, but I'd much rather talk about these things and kind of answer your questions. So any questions that you have, definitely feel free to let it loose in the chat. All right. Any other questions on this, or anything that's on your guys' mind? Okay. And so these ethical and moral theories, none of them are absolutely right, but then you can kind of think of them as just kind of different perspectives. And so I'm just gonna kind of list the ones that I have in the notes here. Okay? So the first one that I have is utilitarianism. And so the whole idea with utilitarianism is to is basically to make decisions that maximize the well-being of society as a whole. Okay? Okay. And the cost for this is to sacrifice the well-being of you know, the well-being of individuals. Okay? Okay. And so an example of this kind of ethical, you know, theory in action is the construction of dams. Okay? And so the nice thing about dams is that if you build one, you know, they provide a lot of benefits to the community, right? And so a lot of these benefits include flood control, drinking water, and power. Okay. But you know, the other side of that is if you go build the dam, you know, it's going to affect a lot of the individuals that live kind of right in the near vicinity. Okay. And so often what happens is that the individuals that are living next to the where the dam is going to be constructed, they have to relocate due to kind of the construction and just you know, any local flooding that occurs. Okay. And so, you know, we can see the construction of the dam as, you know, as it's providing a lot of goods for, you know, a lot of the community, but at the same time, you know, some of the well-being of certain individuals have to, you know, have to be sacrificed in the process. Okay. But according to utilitarianism, this is a worthy trade-off because we're benefiting more people, you know, while negatively impacting a certain few. Okay? And so obviously, you know, this is not a perfect theory. And so, you know, yes, it would be great to provide great benefits to the society, but at the same time, you know, when we ask certain groups of individuals to sacrifice for that, you know, that might not, you know, be a fair thing, right? And so, you know, when you're thinking about utilitarianism, you know, it's always good to ask the question that, you know, would you feel like it's fair if you and your community, you know, you and like, you know, let's say that, you know, I give you a deal where it says that, like, you know, I'll give everyone in the class A's, but you have to get an F in this class and you have to retake it, right? And so obviously, you know, you would think that's not fair, even though you would benefit, you know, 45 other people in the class. You know, the fact that you have to be the one to kind of take on that that burden, you know, is not really fair. Right? that's not on the table, so I'm not offering that. But you know, that's why utilitarianism, while, you know, in theory it might sound great, you know, choosing the people that have to kind of sacrifice and, you know, for the greater good, you know, however you define the greater good is not really that fair. Okay, any questions on utilitarianism? Okay. Okay, so the next theory that we'll go over is duty ethics and rights ethics. And so these guys are very closely related. So basically what they say is that, if you follow these ethical theories, then that says that, we have a duty to protect the rights, the individual rights of others. Okay? Okay. In terms of rights, we define individual rights to be, the right to life, liberty, and prosperity. And it's going to be all of our collective responsibility to protect these for forever. Okay. And so if you're following this this line of thought, then any ethical decision or ethical consequence that can infringe upon these rights for other people, that's something that would go against these this ethic. So in some sense, you can almost think of it as kind of the opposite of utilitarianism, right? And so if we go back to our dam example, and so yes, even though if we built the dam, that would benefit a lot of society, but then it would also infringe upon the rights of all the people that are living close to the dam itself. Okay? And so in that case, according to duties and rights ethics, that this would not be a good thing to do. Okay? And so obviously for a situation as complex as living in the U.S. where we have such a diverse country, this is really complicated, because oftentimes when you try to protect the rights of one group of people, then this is going to conflict with the rights of another group of people. So it's very difficult to do, especially when you have such a diverse diverse audience. Okay. Any questions on duties and rights ethics? Okay. Okay. And so the next school of thought that we'll go over is virtue ethics. Okay. And so virtue ethics basically is an ethical theory based around what a virtuous person would do. Okay. And so by virtue, what I mean, virtuous, what I mean is, generally character traits that we assign as good. Okay. And so some good character traits that we generally, are viewed as good are things like responsibility, honesty, competence, loyalty, respect. I think you guys get the idea. And so those are the qualities that we kind of expect a virtuous person to display. Okay. And on the other side, there's also bad character traits, right? And so for someone that's not virtuous, we expect them to be things like, dishonest, not disloyal, irresponsible, okay, disrespectful. You guys get the idea, okay. And so virtue ethics, really frames an ethical decision based upon these character traits. Okay, and so you can say, if we go back to the dam example, right? And so, if we build the dam, then that would be something that's responsible to do. You can frame it in that way because it's something that would provide a lot of good benefits for the community. Okay? But you can also frame it in such a way that it can also be very disrespectful to all the people that live close to the dam, where they kind of have to uproot their lives because of the construction of this dam. Okay? And so the interesting thing about applying virtue ethics for engineering is that these are qualities that we often give to people, right? We often describe a person as being loyal or responsible. But when you try to apply them to an engineering decision, should I buy pump A or pump B? It's hard to say. Pump A, that's going to be the responsible pump, or pump B, that's going to be the loyal pump. It doesn't always directly apply, right? And so I think the best way to apply virtue ethics to an engineering situation is to apply to the action itself. Okay? And so you can ask yourself, is this action honest? Or will this action demonstrate loyalty? Or have I acted responsibly? Okay, and so it's not the engineering object itself. Like the dam, the dam is just an inanimate object. Like it can't be loyal or responsible. But is the decision to build the dam, is that a responsible one? Is that an honest one? Those are the questions that you can ask yourself. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay, and so I want to tell another story. Okay, so another example. Okay. And so in this story, this story takes place in late 1984. Okay. And the location will be in India. Okay. And so it'll be a town called Bhopal, India. Right. And so in this community, there was a chemical plant that was built in the area. And this chemical plant was producing a huge amount of benefits to the community. Okay. Okay. And so economically, it was producing a ton of revenue. Okay. Okay. Because this community was basically able to sell a lot of the outputs, the energy, the chemicals from the chemical plant, in order to benefit them economically. Okay. It provided, a lot of jobs for the locals. Okay. Okay. But the downside of this is that there were, that there's a lot of safety risks. Okay. And so what happened, and the reason why this case is famous, is that there is a pressure relief valve that broke that was storing a very toxic chemical. Okay. And so when this valve broke, basically this toxic chemical spread through the air to all of the surrounding areas. And unfortunately, a lot of the the villages around that plant were very densely populated. And so what had happened was that around 2,000 people were killed. And outside the ones that that died, there were thousands more that were either injured or permanently disabled as a result of this valve breaking. Okay. And so after some investigation, what was found was that the reason the valve broke was not just a random occurrence, and so the valve break was due to kind of a long history and a long time of negligence. Okay? And so what do I mean by negligence? So what I mean by that is, safety checks were kind of ignored. Maintenance was not properly done on these valves. The technicians that work with them even connected, pipes incorrectly. I think worst of all, a lot of the safety sensors were disabled just because they were kind of being a nuisance for kind of the everyday life. And so obviously, this was a very terrible thing, and neglecting those responsibilities was led to a very, very big tragedy. Okay? And so in this situation, we can see that engineering this chemical plant, it was able to bring a lot of benefits to the community around it. But these economic benefits have to be balanced with the health and safety of just the general public and the area around it as well. Okay? And so even if it, even if it costs, time, it costs money, you can see the result of an incident happening is much greater than, a few more inconveniences. Okay? And so the question, that I'll pose to you guys is that, in a situation like this, how can we view them within the lens of, all the different ethical theories that we just went over? So, how does this apply to utilitarianism, or how does this apply to duty rights and ethics rights? How does virtue ethics filter into this? Right? And so I'll kind of leave that with you guys, because we are almost out of time, and we're almost at the end. So I do want to finish this set of lecture notes. But when you have a situation like this, and especially for your projects, it's important. It's a good way to practice it is to view these situations within the lens of some of the ethical theories. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay, and so let's talk about personal versus corporate morality. Okay. And so, up to this point, we can see that, as individual engineers, we can exercise ethical thinking, and we can. There's a lot of different codes and ethical theories out there to kind of help guide us to make ethical actions. Okay? And when individuals do step out of line, and they do make decisions that are unethical, we can hold them accountable for their actions. Okay. But what about a corporation? Okay. Okay. A corporation is not like a thinking person. So a corporation cannot, think like a person. Okay. And so is it fair, I think the question to ask, like, is it fair to hold a company to the same, standards for ethics and morality? Because, a company, can we really expect it to display honesty and respect? Okay. And the answer to that is, yes, we should hold our companies to the same, moral standards, because behind those companies are actually individuals that are making those decisions as well. Okay? Usually it's the people at the top, and so usually, it's the people at the top that have to be held accountable for this. Okay. Okay. And so, just because, especially for some of the projects that you guys will be working on, we can say that, BP, acted unethically, right, as a company. But at the same time, it was a lot of individuals that were in the company that, caused these, situations to happen. Okay, so for the last 5 minutes, I do want to introduce some non-Western, lines of ethical thought. Okay. And so this is becoming increasingly important in today's, economy, because engineering is more and more becoming a global enterprise. Okay. And so you're going to have businesses, you're going to have vendors, you're going to have, collaborators that are, all across the world. And so in order for you to kind of properly work for these, or work with these people, in different companies and different entities, it's important to kind of, recognize, the differences in culture and the different expectations for ethical behavior. Okay. And so I'll highlight two here. And it's going to be impossible to sum up all of these ethics in just 4 minutes of time. But it's again this is kind of just to be aware of it, and just to kind of give you just a general sense. Okay. And so first, let's go over Chinese ethics. Okay. And so a lot of at least traditional Chinese ethical thought kind of revolves around the teachings of Confucius. Okay. Okay. And so what these teachings basically say is that whenever you make an ethical decision, you have to kind of have a balance between individual rights and the community needs. Okay. And so an ethical decision won't favor kind of one side or the other one, but rather tries to find, the best path in the middle that kind of satisfies both of these as best as possible. Okay. And so this is kind of based around the idea that both the individual and the community, they both depend on each other in order to have like a healthy society. Okay. And so the actions that individuals must take must balance both of these needs, because they both depend on each other. All right, any questions on that? Okay. And then finally, let's talk just very briefly about Indian ethics. Okay. And so Indian ethics, focuses a lot less on the theoretical, intellectual aspects of ethics, and more on the practical and spiritual, view of ethics. And actually, if it actually has a lot of similarities to virtue ethics. Okay. So in other words, actions that are virtuous, are ethical. They display certain characteristics. Okay. And so some of these characteristics can be things like nonviolence, truth, freedom from anger, tranquility, aversion to fault finding. Okay. Okay, etc. Okay. Right. So you know, these Indian ethics kind of focuses around a lot on these character traits and kind of trying to display them in every decisions that you make. Okay. Okay, so that's all we got time for today because it's 2:15. So I'm going to let you guys go. So thank you guys for tuning in today. And so today we just kind of provided just an overview of what engineering ethics is and various lines of thought. And so over the next few weeks, we're going to go over into the specifics, specific topics. So we're going to spend a while on health and safety because that's a big one for engineers. And then from there we'll go on to corporate ethics and then to the environment and computer privacy. And then after that we'll have our final presentations. Okay. All right, so thank you everybody for tuning in today. So on Thursday, you're not required to come to the lecture, but I will be here in the Zoom call. So if you want to ask questions at the midterm, I'll be there to kind of answer your questions right away. But of course, you're not required. So if I don't see you on Thursday, then I'll see you guys next week. And so best of luck on the midterm. Ping me if you have any questions about anything, and I'll see you guys when I see you. Thanks, guys.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks, you too.
Professor, I had messaged you earlier.
Yes.
Actually, you answered my question when we were going over the problem.
Okay, great.
Yeah. I made the mistake of, I had thought the question was asking us to add 500,000 plus 35,000. I thought it was going to be, like your A.
Ah, okay, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do need to correct my solution, but I think seems like you got the idea from it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you
great.
so much.
Great. Yep.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Professor?
Yep.
I have a quick question. So I moved to the States from almost like 6 years, and I don't know anything about like my rights as an engineer. So how could I know or like search more about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're definitely gonna go over that over the next few weeks. But I would definitely start with the codes of ethics, because
Code of ethics.
Yeah. So the codes of ethics that I posted on Canvas, and so if we read that, that not only does it provide you kind of a guidelines for how you act, but also these societies are also resources for you too. So any way that if you feel like if you're doing something that's questionable, I think a lot of these societies have ways that you kind of contact them and kind of get some counseling on how you can act in those ways, and they'll give you legal counsel as well. So if you have to bring legal into it, then they give you advice on that as well. So definitely check out the professional societies. They're always there to kind of support you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm watching the video now. Oh man. Yeah, it's it's become famous. Yeah, the Ford Pinto. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I haven't seen that one before.